Hello and welcome to Gigi's Talk, where we explore leadership, emotional intelligence, and the deeper work behind meaningful impact. Here's a powerful idea that says we don't rise by chance, we rise by design. And today's conversation is about exactly that, designing leadership that is just not effective but conscious, human, and sustainable. I am Geetha Ravisankar, your emotional intelligence mentor, founder of GG's Academy, and author of two books. Today, I am having a conversation with Roohi Sharma, a systems thinker, leadership coach, and social impact leader working at the intersection of well-being, education, and institutional change. Ruhi brings a rare ability to translate complexities into clarity, and in this episode, we explore what it truly takes to create impact without burnout, without overfunctioning, and without losing yourself in the process. If you are someone who wants to lead with depth, build meaningful connections, and change, and simply understand yourself better as a leader, stay with us till the end. Let's begin. Welcome, Ruhi, to the show.
Hi, Geetha. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Your work sits at the intersection of leadership, well-being, and system change. What first drew you to this space?
I don't think I came in as a planned venture in this space, but I think a big part of my thinking process is that life is intersectional. So today I can speak from that lens, but I was by education I was a computer science engineer. The first around 2 years in the tech sector, and at that time I quit full-time work as an SAP ABAP application developer at IBM to take a leap of faith and do the Teach for India fellowship. I was 24 at the time. I thought nobody technically depends on me for livelihood, so I can take that risk, and it will give me some time to think about why I'm doing this. I mean, I had my broad why, but and I will do some good work in the education sector, and being the product of education, I thought I had some thoughts on what education should look like and what I had experienced growing up in a school in Delhi. And so after those 2 years, I think I do go back to those 2 years, 2011 to 13. And post that, I think I was more transformed than possibly the 86th, 3rd and 5th graders I was teaching during the 2 years. And I wanted to stay in the social impact sector, but also look at what does impact look like outside the classroom. And it is 15, 16 years and counting since those 2 years, and I'm still in that sector. Privileged to experience it from multiple vantage points. I quit full-time work as an associate director last year at India Leaders for Social Sector, and I'm about to finish 1 year of saying I'm retiring from salaried full-time work, hopefully for good. Let's see. I think all of that movement or potential or even momentum building has happened in these 15, 16 years. So I wouldn't be who I am and doing what I'm doing if it was not for those 2 years. Yeah.
So wonderful that those 2 years built the present. You have worked across education, policy, and social impact. So what is that one pattern you had consistently been seeing that holds people or system back for real change?
I think I can speak about a value. So even when I quit full-time work last year and gave myself permission to say I can try a different kind of way of life, or calling myself an entrepreneur, until that time I've lived for significant times in 2 countries and done 8 jobs. So usual in traditional sense of how we look at CVs and make judgments, anybody could see and say, oh, this is probably someone who's moving around and not knowing what to do. And maybe the girl in 24 who quit IBM, you could have said that about her. But I think underlying all those 8 switches was the value of equity. Not how we see equity in, the 𝐵𝐵𝐿 kinds, but equity as a value. And it took me 8 jobs to even articulate that. Because even and I'll go back to the 2 years of the Teach for India. I am a product of middle class India as a family. And I was born and raised in Delhi. I still went to a private school. I mean, we call it like public schools because the public appellation has come from the British kind of schooling system. But it was a private school in Delhi, the one where my parents decided for me to go. And the school where I was teaching was in the low-income private category in the Teach for India roster of schools in Pune. So the school I went in, and in the school I was teaching, I mean, even that was its own different universes and ecosystems. Even how we speak about equity and we realize in multiple contexts we are sitting across tables that are tilted. So I think it is value of equity that is the glue that has made me flow across those 8 very different type of work streams. But also I think the big picture has organically been the K20 education spectrum. When I say K20, kindergarten to 12, the usual, but also higher education based on the spaces I kept being associated with after that. So, yeah.
You speak about being a system thinker. For someone listening, what does it actually mean to see life and leadership through a systems lens?
How vulnerable can I get? Not to complicate things, but every unit is a system, right? In the morning, I had put a load of laundry in the washing machine that's in the balcony. And there is a little bird feeder. Even if I close the door, just that balcony is a system. The whole house can be a system. The family of origin can be a system. The family you get married into is a system. So, I'm grateful for a very supportive, loving family. And yet, this is also a space of constant dialogue, constant conflict. But I think today I see it as a growth mechanism, and I'm very privileged and glad that at different points, even your family members serve as different kind of mirrors and vantage points, both good and bad, but also good and bad at qualifier. So I'm divorced. I am a non-custodial parent to an 8-year-old, which means I am a parent, biological parent. I have not physically met my own child in 2 years now. And I didn't choose this for myself completely, if I were to bluntly put it across. And yet, even if I talk about it with kindness, I'm not saying all of this with bitterness, but when you ask this question, and I was talking to a uncle aunt of mine in a very safe conversation, and I said, I am by birth, I am a Hindu, and sometimes when we talk about marginalization, we also have to talk about privilege, right? And I will only talk from an I lens, which is important because I can't speak for the other. And it's important today, even in the work I do in identity work as a coach, that the I language is both empowering, but I only owe an explanation from my side on how I see the world. I think being a Hindu is a privilege for me because I personally have not been discriminated against, and I can only speak from my lens. And everybody has different privileges, different marginalization, but I don't attach to this identity because as a concept, I can see how religion can also be its own divide in a conversation when you're in the same room with somebody from a different religion. So I don't want to focalize it on religion, but what I'm saying is important because I'm bringing in nuance. So I also married somebody who was my childhood sweetheart and was in the relationship with 15 years, and they were a more safe space than some of the safe space in my own home. So I'm saying the longer scenic route to lay out the context of why a lot of it is important, and why sometimes conflict is both needed, and sometimes conflict also gives you answer of why yes and why not. And there is this concept of kanyadan in marriages in Hinduism, and Hinduism is also a way of life, so people can form their own rules. I also have friends where the kanyadan system has not been in there. I didn't question it, so I was also a participant and beneficiary in going through the process of that kind of marriage, even though I was not sitting with those questions. But as I'm divorced, so in the regular way a marriage is, if one system donated me as the daughter without holistic consent, I'm not saying I was even questioning that. I participated in it. It's a beautiful process. And I was part of I'm only speaking as a post facto, as an observer. If one system of my birth, of my safe space, decided it was okay, or they could take that part of donating me, and then I was part of another beautiful system, and that system at some point decided they could return me. So now I am sitting in this no man's land. I'm still loved. I'm not questioning that, okay? But I'm my own marginalized identity here in this space. And so I also trigger some people, even while I'm regulated, in asking very gentle questions. So systemic awareness sometimes also means that creating meaning in that tiny thread of a liminal space that I'm calling no man's land. And I'm not a man, I'm a woman. The gender, who I am as a gender, is not a confusing thing for me. So I think it is also beautiful to witness multiple systems, because while everything is happening in every system, even from a learning space, sometimes you have to detach to understand what one system brought, what other system brought, who you are at that intersection, what is your personal code of conduct, even when nobody is watching and while everybody is watching, something like in this space. So I don't know if I complicated it, but I wanted to detail it out and bring that nuance. So for me, even a tiny thing is a system, and operationalizing a whole company is a system, and it depends on how we are defining things.
That you were the vulnerability of yours is so empowering. Why do so many well leaders struggle to create that lasting impact despite working very hard?
I think there are multiple reasons. I launched my first experiential retreat space last year and did a first cohort of that, and I called it was for women leaders. And I later in the unpacking and the reflection, and as I put together the insights that came from that space, a very simple question somebody had said later on why they decided this was not for them. They didn't consider themselves a leader. And I wanted to intentionally keep that keyword leader, because it was important to me. And it's a verb and an action, and not just an intellectualizing space. Because to me, who taught 2 years in that classroom and later also witnessed the mothering part of it, to me, even a toddler on a Sunday hike who's walking ahead is showing leadership, and the parent who's behind, who's following, is also showing a different kind of leadership. So leadership is assumed, but leadership is also visibilized and said, given right space and the right kind of structure, everybody is a leader in their own making.
I love when you said that leadership is how you view it. Even the toddler walking without assistance is a leader, and the parent holding back control is also a leader. He said, your work is trauma aware and human centered. How can leaders become more conscious of the invisible emotional realities people carry?
That is such an important and interesting questions. I like to today sometimes at a joke I will say I'm a design snob, and I think I credit it to In college, I think I started following this blog at the time, but now a big website called Apartment Therapy, because I was interested in how do you optimize a small space and yet make it scenic, make sure you can do more with because growing up, especially in college or right after, the square footage in spaces I wanted to autonomously live in was limited. And yet I think I have good design skills, and including design thinking, which is both a learned skill and yet and also practice skill. And so I remember reading an article, I can't date it, but it left a mark in my head, and it was something about, again, designing spaces, but from the lens that we all, even in our own homes, we all have a favorite cushion, a favorite chair, or a spot where we want to settle in most of the time for comfort, safety, what have you. And the article was an invitation to find a corner we think is not loved in our own home, and go sit there and bring your awareness to that corner. And I was like, what will this do? I know my home. And I actually found a space on the floor. I usually don't automatically go sit on the floor. And with the diary based on the instructions, because I wanted to give it a try. This felt like a nice, cute, under 30 minutes kind of an exercise. But even when you sit in an unloved part of, unloved not because there's no intention, unloved because it's just not chosen, part of your own home, and you bring awareness to, okay, what is it that I've not noticed? It was easy to see the cobwebs or the dust bunnies from a different height, different space, and also like the different kind of this is not a weekday project that you can do at 9 a.m. in the morning. So this was a weekend activity, which meant I had to take time out to sit in an unloved corner of my own home and see. And then it was not about, oh, let me get the broom and clean it. That was not this exercise was about. It was stepping in a shoe that's not my shoe kind of a space. But it was bringing compassion and awareness into my own home where I thought everything was in order. And so then it was also an invitation. Can you designate an area in your own home where you can be your messy self? So there is an organized self and a messy self. And today, even before this call, I was telling you that it is my dining table where I've given myself full liberty to be my most messy self. And you can't see right about, behind this laptop screen. But I wanted to clean a shelf out in the morning, and it's as messy as it can get. So, yeah.
So how human are you in your talk as well? Because when you say the messy self, every one of us has it. But how many of us are comfortable enough to share that part of us? So you have worked with non-profits, policymakers, and leaders globally. What is one leadership quality that truly differentiates those who create meaningful change?
I think there are two that I want to bring to the call. One is psychological safety, and I'm not calling it out as a management jargon. The other part is reflection spaces. They can both happen they can both be useful in tandem, and they can both be weaponized in tandem. So and it's a catch-22, because no organization doesn't intend for it to happen, right? There is always intention, and yet the muscles that an organization requires in the innovation phase and the muscles we require in a scale phase, and they all keep interchanging with every kind of iteration, are different. And yet when we pass on those charters, we don't have a pause and reflect layer outside of the check mark, let's do it in the financial year, so that we can say we have brought in pizzas and people together for conversation and camaraderie, which happens. So I think it is just an invitation to just look at our own homes in a different cobweb space and be okay with it. But when we create space for, let's do that big exhale and loosen up and see what comes up. One is the setting up of that intentional space, a garden or whatever that brings that tranquility. The other part is the hard conversation, and not when you're just about to say let go someone or put someone on a paper, but as a way of life. And I will go back again to the Teach for India classroom because I was the third cohort of Teach for India. And Teach for India happened 25 years after Teach for America happened. During those time, I had a manager both years, and once a month we would unpack a video that was taken in the classroom. And before that, we knew that this was not a criticism space because it was happening at a cadence at that time. So we would watch that video together and we would unpack it as a safe space conversation where we were like, this is the classroom. Here you did this. Here we could have done better with this group of kids. Do you know if we can club some of this in a differentiated setting? So I think those were powerful conversations. And when it is done at a cadence and with no rushing in and people know there is that park time, not everywhere, but there were pockets where I witnessed it even in organizations I was part of later on, where I had that space. And initially, not every time I found it useful, but over time I figured that having that space where I can bring in process, like silly process questions, where, I was failing or to look at it with different eyes, was where a lot of, that forward movement, even without knowing that was what I was trying to do by enabling, by initiative, but also by listening. And when there is that intentionality about both creating psychological safety and having reflection time, a lot of good stuff comes out, even in leadership spaces and even in homes. Because often before that, I was told that, you're bringing up the past, you can't let go. But later on, I could say, this is a framework where if you reflect, doesn't mean you're hanging on to past stuff, you are just unpacking it from new eyes. So that was important to witness from multiple standpoints also.
That's wonderful. That how you can think about the past without hanging on to it and still reflect and bring out the perspective that sheds light to the new things that you have in your life. So, Roohi, many women leaders struggle with burnout, not because they are incapable or there is a capacity issue, but trying to create an impact. What shifts are needed to move from over functioning to sustainable leadership?
I'm sitting with that intentionally because I'm going to hit another dose of my own storyline in this. I went through a massive burnout phase around in COVID. Mm-hmm. And I think for the scope of this discussion, I won't go into a lot of factors that went into it. I do a lot of writing today as well. The general narrative is I went through a mental health breakdown. I spent 9 days at a mental health hospital. This was in the US. I was also told that nobody comes by someone, that people usually don't stay there for a longer duration, 90, 180 days sometimes, which was its own kind of triggering. But if I were to simplify those 9 days, I slept for a good amount of 2 days, I would say. And the remaining 7 days, I was back to being a researcher, because I was also a public university research analyst at the time, full-time mother of two under two kids at the time. And it was its own kind of burnout. And, and it's been 6 years now. And I can say multiple things about that, but this is not that conversation. And yet, even when you look at the same event from new eyes at different checkpoints in your life, while the original stance is true, there are also layered things that, I have been able to brought awareness to, because, I've sit in a different exploratory part, both within me and somewhere outside with someone in a safe structure, to let that exhale out and say, this is also what was happening. Oh, this is also what was happening. And, there's also a Hollywood movie called Vantage Point where a catastrophe happens and you are seeing the same event again and again from the POV of multiple characters. And yet, sometimes we say, oh, this thing is a distortion, this thing is the reality, this is the truth, it's not. But if it's different POVs conveying very different storyline of the same event, and because it's coming from different characters of that story, it's not, we won't say it's distortion, it's just their truth. And truth is also multifaceted. Yes, there was the burnout. Yes, it was COVID. Yes, I had also for the first time been grieving my dad, who had passed away 16 months before that. There was also, the collective grief of COVID that was going on. There were also systemic factors that I don't want to unpack in this call. And so sometimes the sitting with that and relabeling some of the things from new points of awareness with new, and I consented by signing the form. So I went in that space, but I didn't go there to even be there for 9 days, And when I was the researcher sitting and listening, I'm going to use a Hindi phrase here or Hindi sentence. Are you okay with Hindi? Do you understand Hindi?
Please go ahead.
I met so many people in that space. I also wrote many things. I participated in some of the activities, because why would you not reap the benefits of being in that setting? And I went, and there was a time to experience sunlight also, so I went and I'll take that sunlight window. And कहना बहुत मुश्किल है गीता कि कौन ज़्यादा पागल है, वो लोग जो वहाँ कैद थे या हम सब लोग जो यहाँ पे खुले फ्री हैं. And I think I think you hit the hammer on the nail with that question कि I'm still the same person in and out, like in that space and out. But there is a element where you holistically consent to something, even something as basic as coaching, as basic as therapy, and as basic as choosing to show up at a retreat or whatever that is. And there is the ecosystem deciding, and not one person. Nothing happens in isolation, and one person cannot bring it down, one person cannot build it. So it's always an ecosystem together, and which is where I'm bringing the system part of it. I am also part of the system. So when I say even something I say will trigger, that's not a distortion. It's just a different kind of truth. And we have to be okay with saying that multiple truths can happen even from the lens of the same person. And the funny thing is that when you're a woman, you're going through the menstrual cycle every month, and yet the word crazy and hormonal are used in not so safe senses. And I'm not making any direct indication of one or two or some people. It's a holistic conversation now that I'm having. There are more evidence-based study on erectile dysfunction than there are in how menstrual cycles and different needs, not now she's hormonal, different needs have to be catered to. And the fact that we are all gendered or not the same in some ways, and we are also different. But every time when I am saying this nuanced statement, somebody will say, every time I would hear someone say, man and women both, oh, but men have more physical strength. If I put $1 in a bank account, somebody had said that to me while I was not even done making this full conversation, I would probably be sitting on some kind of fortune too. So this is discounting that, including, we also know, the last Olympics was the first time where there was equal enrollment of participants from both gender. So just that statement is an exhale and sit and reflect statement, and not a oh but, right? So to say that our bodies have not been studied enough, and even when the official World War ended, Second World War ending a certain space, and then 3 years later, there was a study happening on pain measurement where the subject of the study was laboring women. And the scale broke, but the new tool was not designed. And the women kept laboring. I'm choosing to use very layman terms, okay? That tool is still used to measure pain threshold. And here I'm coming with kindness to unpack both sides, and I'm saying we've never had as many people bearing the torch to say, I need to sit in this discomfort. I need to make statements that are hard hitting. How can we label that a world war ended at X year marker when even 3 years later some of the subjects were different and yet the wars were very different, right? And everybody needs everything. And that is to say, when we say we need more representation of women leaders in leadership spaces, in CXO positions, it doesn't mean that men don't. When we say men need more therapeutic spaces or grief tending spaces or open dialogue spaces, is not to say women don't, right? And it then becomes a let's expand the pie conversation instead of we only have the same pie and we are splitting it. Because I read somewhere and I use it a lot, there's plenty of sun for everyone in the world and it shows up every single day. We don't say, oh, the sun is marginalizing us, right? Absolutely. So yeah.
So when you talk about that, it's so hard hitting that whenever we speak about women, it becomes feminism, and when we speak about men, there is not much of noise there. So you talk about dignity, abundance, and trust-rich spaces. What does it take to actually build these environments in real organizations?
I think even as an individual, I am coming forward with trust in many spaces, and I'm also building trust in many spaces. And they're both happening at the same time. The space where I'm trust forward, I'm assuming safety because I'm feeling it and I'm sensing it, and I can see artifacts, rituals to give me evidence that I am trust forward there because that's happening. And I'm also giving myself permission that this is a trust forward space for me, because even another concept in teaching as leadership that we learned and practice and teach for India was, even with some students, there is kids go back for summer school, and so all the learning also takes a backslide. COVID was a 2-year backslide or learning loss, right? There were kids who were starting post-COVID in 3rd grade, not having held a pen, not knowing how to put pressure in their own, gross fine motor skills to write. So there is the concept is called check for understanding. Today I use it as a check for personal understanding to also test myself that is it the same pattern and am I showing up differently, right? So we have to keep doing those things in both the trust forward and the trust building to see is there evidence of staying, and also is there evidence of continuing. Is it merit to just also pull out in certain areas because our bandwidth is also different. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. So we also have to give ourselves permission that just because we want to and we can wing it doesn't mean 24 can become 48 even in a 24-hour bucket.
And if someone wants to create that impact but feels overwhelmed on the scale of problem, where should they really begin?
List what problems are we talking about is probably the first step, because I started my coach training program at Kocharya in August 2024, and a lot of the initial bundle of our practice hours was in peer coaching. One person would be coached, then the other person would be coached, and we would count it as one offering because technically it's a barter paid in system. And one of my peers there said, I was in another group and they were making an Excel list of problems. I said, what do you mean Excel list of problems? I said, in peer coaching, when you are the coachee and you don't know what to bring to the conversation, if you have a handy list and, you can take those problems. And at the time I was like, I think it was also a readiness thing. I was like, I don't think I have that many problems. Me, because of all the context I said, even then when I didn't have access to, my own child, I was like, yes, I'm unpacking some of these things. But so it's also the readiness that we give to ourselves first. Are we ready to experience that change? Are we ready to be unfiltered? Are we ready to have a truthful conversation where truth will also hurt us equally and yet keep marching forward? So even to say that we need to solve 1 million problems is not an invitation to boil the ocean so that others can be benefited. Can we also sit in our own version of wherever we are in the soup to figure out what is our forward movement first. I was actually a coachee first with someone for about 10 months till I uh, found readiness to explore the coach track as well. So both of those spaces are important, where I am a beneficiary, but I am also sitting for somebody else's transformation.
That comes forward as very truthful because I have also been through that space. And when you say that, to be honest enough to realize what internal dialogue is going inside, to reflect out and then be able to be coach ready, that is a different perspective as well for growth. So, looking ahead, what kind of leadership does the world more urgently need, and what must we unlearn to become those leaders?
I will throw in another leadership jargon, but today I think I've also felt it in as embodied. I think the situational leadership is, and both the servant leadership are both styles where I identify with. Situational because, even in the parent and toddler combination, you can be both the active leader and a follower, and they're both leadership in different settings. You can, and so it is about what comes in the moment for both self and the others who are part of my ecosystem, or people who in their ecosystem. So I have worked with one of the coaching work. I worked with a school principal, and a lot of that was about taking stock on, you're not actually alone. So how do you leverage what you have and say, everybody is supporting this forward movement journey for the school, versus, oh, what do I do because I'm putting out fires at every moment. So even as a leader, stepping out of your own way and stepping out of the way of your own team is just as important. And I can see that today I'm learning to call myself a first time founder. So I am also sometimes able to see that through both like journaling, peer coaching, and other spaces I draw inspiration and ideas from, that I also show up as my own mountain. So I have to be ready, and I have to enable that I have to get out of my own way to even get to the next milestone, and that's equally important.
So wonderful. So, as we come to the end of this beautiful conversation, one thing becomes very clear. Leadership today is not just about action, it is about awareness. And Roohi, thank you for bringing such a clarity and honesty into this space. The conversation like these don't just inform, they actually transform. And to anyone listening out there, if something in this episode made you pause, reflect, or even see yourself differently, just move on. Share your biggest takeaway in the comments, or send this to someone who is building something really meaningful. Like this video so it reaches more people who need it. And subscribe to Gigi's Talk, where we bring in conversations that help you lead not just externally but internally. Because real impact doesn't come from doing more, it comes from becoming more aware. Until next time, stay grounded, stay intentional, and lead with clarity. This is Geetha Ravisankar, and this is Gigi's Talk, signing off. Thank you.
Thank you, Geetha, and this was wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.